This is it. You've held your CDs for the last 2 minutes for the biggest pull in the dungeon. Those last packs were slow, but that's okay. You're gonna pump. Your DPS is gonna be through the roof. You're about to blast this pack into the Shadowlands. Don't get me wrong, big numbers feel good, but this type of approach is one of the biggest errors separating good M+ players from great M+ players: stalling cooldowns. While you might be annihilating certain packs, you're likely losing huge amounts of DPS without even realizing it. In this video, I'm going to cover why hoarding CDs is one of the biggest time losses in Mythic+, analyze the logs of some top players, and give a general approach to ensure that you can maximize your output regardless of what spec you play. Let's take a look at this +19 hauls I ran recently as Prot Paladin. Pausing here, we can see that the boss is at 12%. Now looking at this situation, should I be sending wings? In this clip, I chose not to, thinking that the next pull is the big lust pack, I'd be better off using it there. So we slowly finish off the boss's remaining health, head up to the big trash pull, and rip wings once they're all gathered. Now, seems like a pretty normal situation, right? Well, this is actually a big mistake on my part. Between the start of the clip and when I sent wings, a full minute had ticked by. Now, wings is a 2-minute cooldown, but with CDR it's more like 1:20. So in the process of holding, I lost almost an entire use just to have it on pull for the next pack. The thing is, while it feels wrong, holding cooldowns for the perfect moment is more often than not a huge mistake. The damage you lose by not ripping a CD is rarely offset by the damage you get by using it on the perfect pack coming up. Let's think about our major cooldowns like a bucket being filled with water. The tap filling it is constantly flowing, and when it's full, we can throw the full bucket of water at nerds. So we allow the bucket to fill to the top, get ready to soak our target, and then we realize another noob is approaching, and we'd rather soak him even more. As we're waiting for this guy to get in range for our watery apocalypse, the bucket is continuously overflowing. All of that wasted water could have been filling a second bucket. We could have soaked both those nerds, but instead we wasted it and only soaked one. WoW cooldowns are exactly the same. In order to get out of this bad habit, there are a few misconceptions I think we need to dispel first. First up, we don't need to use our cooldowns on pull. I'm not sure whether this is just a bit of a byproduct of raiding, but in most cases, having CDs at the start of a pull is really not that big of a deal. In the clip from before, had I have sent my wings on the prior boss, I probably would have had it about 20 seconds into the next pull. If I then rip it 20 seconds in, my DPS would have been very similar, aside from the fact that the ankle biters would have likely been close to dead. But does that really matter? Gaining an extra bit of damage, which is mostly just paddy and irrelevant as well on the small dudes, does that outweigh nearly 70% of an entire cooldown being lost? Our biggest DPS cooldown? No, almost definitely not. The second misconception is that we need to delete a pack fast. While this is occasionally true, in most situations, it's not. I think this is more of a mindset issue than anything. In most cases, we tend to view dungeons more as a set of pulls strung together rather than like a cohesive whole. We look at an MDT route and we go, oh, I need to nuke this pack. Then I move to the next pack. Then I need to nuke this mob in the pack after. The truth is, a dungeon is more or less like a continuous race rather than a bunch of checkpoints, and our cooldowns are sort of like a sprint button. While we could save our sprint button for more dangerous sections of the race, it's almost always faster to just sprint as often as we possibly can. On top of this, at most key levels, even dangerous mobs don't need to be obliterated. While in a +22 ecodome, you might need to nuke a sentinel ASAP as soon as it starts pulsing below 50%, at a +16, it's nowhere near as important. Holding your CDs for a few seconds to line up with this phase is a good idea, but if you're sitting on them at the start of the pull and waiting for 50% of the pull to go by before using them, you've just wasted a huge portion of your DPS. And thirdly, perfect CDs are less important than you think. This doesn't feel true because we almost get like a nice bit of positive feedback when we blast all of our big offensive CDs on a big pull in Mythic+. the numbers spike up and it looks like we've just pumped out heaps of damage. The thing is though, in almost all situations, more uses of a cooldown across an entire dungeon almost always outweighs fewer uses that are more good. But don't just take my word for it, let's have a look at some logs and see exactly what I mean. So first up here we have the top holes log from a Frost DK. We're going to look at the major DPS cooldown Breath of Sindragosa. This is a 1.5 minute CD. Here we can see that the log has very little downtime between breath uses. The DK is almost always sending it on cooldown. They got 17 uses total and did 13.4 million DPS. Now in comparison, a random log from another Frost DK, dungeon length almost identical time-wise, but we can see multiple gaps between Breath of Sindragosa usage. They only managed 13 uses across the whole dungeon and totaled 8.8 million DPS. Now, obviously the DPS difference is based on many more factors than just this, but in general, this shows us one thing: the best players who are doing the most damage are basically ripping their major CDs as often as possible. Here's another example. The top streets log for Retribution Paladin, a dungeon with a lot of downtime as well, just forced downtime, has a Paladin utilizing Wake of Ashes 52 times in the top log, as opposed to a streets of a similar-ish length, only using it 46 times. Now I say similar-ish, the second ret actually had an additional minute and a half over the top log. So the gap here is even wider because they had even more opportunities to use Wake of Ashes. In this example, the ret paladin from the lower log has missed out on at minimum 6 uses of Wake of Ashes and more than likely 7 or 8 given the length of the dungeon that they run. You can do the same thing as this with any spec and class yourself. It will be exactly the same across the board. The best players will rip their offensive cooldowns as often as possible. Holding your CDs is almost always bad. With this in mind, here are some simple rules that will not only maximize your DPS, but also make your life a hell of a lot easier. All of those thoughts that you ordinarily have about, like, should I send my CDs here? Is the next pack more dangerous? Will this pack be a good usage of it? Most of them are actually useless thoughts. This doesn't happen very often, but in this exact situation, the simplest approach that requires the least amount of thought is actually the best one. So the easy rule to abide by: if the cooldown is going to last the duration of the pack, send it. If, for example, your major DPS CD gives you 15 seconds of burst and the pack is going to live for about 15 more seconds, fire away. Now, there are exceptions to this rule. First, if you have a really short cooldown, you should probably just rip them anyway. Ret Paladins have a 30-second cooldown in Wake of Ashes. If a pack is only going to last for, say, 8 more seconds, you might not get full value, but the cooldown is so short that any wastage is almost always going to forgo a total use across the dungeon. For Ret, it feels really odd, but you can send CDs even on borderline dead packs, and it'd still be better than holding it for the next pack. On the flip side, if you have a really long CD, you can be a little bit pickier. Say an Elemental Shaman with 3-minute Ascendance. Since this cooldown is longer and is so impactful, holding this for, say, 20 to 30 seconds can be a decent idea, as, say, losing 1 use across an entire dungeon is outweighed by slightly better timing of the CD. But in general, you still don't want to be holding this for any longer than, say, 20 to 30 seconds. And that's basically it. In almost all situations, you'd rather use your cooldowns than save them. Holding is almost always a DPS loss, plain and simple. This sort of applies to defensive and healing CDs as well. While ripping these on cooldown is not really a good idea because you don't get any benefit from them unless damage is actually coming in, the trend is still sort of the same. Holding the cooldown for too long is just bad. As counterintuitive as it might seem, using your cooldowns on cooldown is actually the best approach. A lot of damage is lost not because people are not using their rotations effectively or having periods of downtime in terms of their actual just core rotation. Most of it is because they're just not using their DPS cooldowns because they feel like it needs to be up for the start of a certain pack or up for the start of a certain boss, or needs to be completely maximized in how much damage it outputs. In 90 to say 95% of situations, using your cooldown is going to win out over holding it for a better time to use it. Thank you to all my YouTube members on screen for supporting the channel. If you'd like to support and get some cool perks in return, check out the join button below. I also stream live on Twitch. Drop by and say hi if you want to see me live in action. That's all from me though. Get out there, press your cooldowns, pump lots of numbers. Until next time, gamers, take care.